Welcome to another episode of Treasure Corals. I have multiple aquariums plumbed into one large system. As a matter of fact, there are 5 of those aquariums that use the same water and it circulates through all of them every hour. And yet, they couldn't be any different. In today's video, I want to go over all 5 of those aquariums and show what makes each one of them special. We're going to start by looking at my high energy reef system. This is a water box aquarium. It's 4 feet wide and it's lit by 3 blade aqua illumination blade. These are grows. I've been running this for ever since blades have come out. As a matter of fact, I was using the pre-production model, and as you can see, the tank is looking exceptional. If anything, probably my corals have never looked as good as they have right now. So the polyps are out. All of the issues that I used to have before seem to have gone away. This is me knocking on glass. I don't have any wood nearby. And yeah, look at that. Everything is looking excellent. It's a SPS dominant system. That means that I have very high flow. There is 4 MP40s, so 2 on one side, 2 on the other. I have toyed around with different positioning, and as a matter of fact, I think this is what I now prefer the most. Now, aesthetically, this is not the one that I enjoyed the most. I liked when the 2 of them were on the back wall there and then 2 over here, because then you get the side view that is completely unobstructed, kind of like this. But unfortunately, I don't have that, and right now I think this is a much better layout for the corals. The corals seem to really have taken off after I've made that particular change. So the way they work is one is kind of a little bit higher than the other, and they are almost set up one across the other with just a slight shift over. And I just run different types of modes on this thing. There's a little bit of reef crest, a little bit of anti-sink, where let's say this and the one across will be on an anti-sink, and I get all different patterns. Later on I'll shoot another video just on the flow, and if you do have any questions you want me to cover, I will do that. But as you can see, the main goal in this tank is to keep sticks. It's the SPS coral, and this is hard coral, and you can see that they can handle a lot of light and a lot of flow. And look at that acropora coloring up. So I have not had as good of colors in this aquarium since I've started it. I think the tank is just about a year old, and this is the last tank that I've added to the system. So the system is over 2 years old now, and I started with one large aquarium that we will cover next. And I've had my ups and downs, but finally I was able to add this aquarium in, and it kind of was immediately cycled, right? Because you've got the water coming in that is cycled, you've got the cycled rock, there was coral, and yet I still went through a little bit of an ugly phase on here. But one thing that is very specific about this particular aquarium is those snails that I get every morning at the top of the tank. So I think we can see one right over here. There's actually quite a few, and I still have no idea where they're coming from, who produces them, but I have them just in this aquarium. I don't have them in my other 4 aquariums. So, and they clearly can get through the water column, because you can see that they are in the overflow, but for some reason they really like this particular tank. So it just goes to show you that even with the same water quality, you can have kind of specifics on one tank versus the other. I do clean the glass here probably more frequently because there's just such a light intensity. By the way, if anybody is looking at my water parameters, you can go to treasurecorals.com and just in the About section, you'll see the links where you can see real-time parameters for all of my aquariums. But enough of that. You can see that the colors are really popping. I run predominantly blue with maybe 3 or 4 hours maximum of the kind of 10K look. And over time, I think I've been bringing the 10K to a shorter and shorter duration. Just I find that the blue gives me a little bit more of that safety with the corals. But you can see that in terms of the actual colors, I do have an SPS dominant tank with just frags, and I think the colors do not differ that much, although that tank is looking, it's being run by radiance. I don't have any issues in this tank in terms of the algae. As you can see, there's lots and lots of tanks in here. I got the blue tank and the sailfin. The nice thing about this aquarium being plumbed into a much larger system is that I can feed this tank as much as I want, and even then I think the fish are quite hungry because you don't see any nuisance algae in this aquarium. Now, in terms of polyp extension, I didn't notice anything different about this aquarium, even though I have the same corals under a lower light and stronger flow. I think that more or less things are kind of quite the same. And you can see that even this tab stellata, which is right over here, is probably the nicest it's ever been. So it has very high flow right now. I've turned the flow down, but those polyps are just insane under just being blasted with flow. This is my second aquarium. This system started it all. It was my first aquarium that lately grown into this monster of 5 different aquariums plumbed in together, but it was the first one. It's a 6 feet by 3 feet long custom made tank that is all about frags. I've been fragging for many years, and eventually I wanted a dedicated aquarium as opposed to keeping frags in your sump. So I got this one built about just over 2 years ago. This tank is lit by 4 Radian G5 blues. This is XR30s, and recently I've added 2 aqua illumination blade glows for that a little bit of actinic pop. And so far it's been great. It is, as you can see by the corals, everything looks really happy. I've experimented a lot with the different layouts of the frags, trying to find something that is easy to keep track of the coral, because everything here I do post on treasurecorals.com if you're in Canada, so you can actually see all of these corals. But more importantly, you can see that things are healthy, that the polyps are all coming out. So in this particular aquarium, I don't keep as much of light intensity as I do in the first aquarium. So this is more an LPS driven system, but even with the lower par, I have a few acros and they seem to be looking pretty decent. But I actually don't pay too much attention to this. This tank is all about torches, as you can see over here, and hammers, and some Monties, so slightly different. And even things like the fuzzy Nephthia over there, everything is nice and healthy. So slightly different flow, but this tank is quite different in terms of, while there is no algae forming over here, there's not that many tanks in here, so it's probably my water quality or whatnot that doesn't cause too much of nuisance algae growing. And yet there's also no snails, the ones that we've seen before, so Luckily, there's really no snails, and that's not a problem for my power heads. However, I get a lot more of the Asterina starfish, and that is what makes this particular tank quite different. So this guy is fairly easy to clean. It's a different type of characteristics in terms of it's more of a low energy. I don't run as much of a flow in here, and I find that some corals like it a lot, and some prefer maybe a little bit more of a high energy system. But these torches that we've seen earlier, they are under probably only 250 par maximum, and yet they are super colorful, as you can see over here. Now I've turned off all the flow, but that is what they look like. So what have I learned about this system? I find that placement matters a lot, even under such a uniform light as you can see over here. My goldenrod, for example, wants to be all the way in the corner, otherwise this Anacropora is going to start losing its color. And when I look at all the corals, I examine them fairly regularly to just kind of know when to move things closer to the middle or a little bit off to the side. And even some of the other coral can be temperamental. So this knotty spiral, for example, sometimes it likes higher light, but sometimes I move things a little bit off to the side because they seem to, for some reason, find it a little bit too intense. So this is tank number 2. The tank number 3 is right behind it, and this is my high energy, high flow frag tank for Acropora. So anything that's acro related goes over here. It is, let's take a look, lit by 3 radians, but they go at a much higher intensity, so they're close to 100%. And so far they've been, the corals have been very healthy and happy. So here I can easily get 400 par, maybe 450 sometimes. And if we look at, for example, these guys over here, you've got such awesome corals as Orange Passion, the Red Ferrari, Little Red Ferrari, and quite a few others, Major Laser. So a few fancy names are over here. I even have a couple of anemones, and they do very well under high light and high flow. Now, I find that not every coral I can bring in here. Some of the Montes, for example, the Sunset Montes are doing very well. And even Superman can handle it, and Starburst. But say I wanted to bring in some of the Montes from over here, like the Red Roses or the Sundata, I may have an issue. So I have to look at each coral and decide where I want to do with it. Even the Green Star Polyps, I find that over here you can see they are plush and open, but if I bring this guy up to my reef, the tank number 1, they will close off. So for whatever reason, something they just don't like. It's the same water quality, it's sometimes even the light intensity or flow, but there's just something about it where they don't seem to like it. So this is tank number 3, and it's a very manageable size. So if somebody who wants to get into fragging, this is probably the size I would recommend. This is an 80-gallon reef tank, and you can see I'm kind of using the same Frag Rack Revolution system that I've designed and I talked about in some of the other videos. Again, this is custom design or unique design by Treasure Corals, which is what I design. Now, overall, I find that acros really do well in this tank. I can really crank up the flow, so I've got 2 MP40s on one side, 1 MP40 on the other, and they are at random, just kind of going full speed in this particular tank. getting to tank number 4. This is my smallest tank, and it has very little flow going through it. So I still don't know what I will use it for. For a while, this was what I was calling my showcase tank. This is where I was trying to keep all the corals that I was posting on the website, but then eventually I found some better ways to organize things, and I don't know, maybe this will be my torch tank, maybe it will be something else, but again, it's quite a different aquarium. This one is running G6 Radian, and while I find it a little bit more purple, and it took me a while to dial in the G6s where now the coral, so it used to be, say, 6 months ago. If I were to take a frag from this tank and put it over here, the frag would just not do well. It would burn, it would die, and I still don't really know why, but maybe some tweaking to my light spectrum, to the light schedule, lowering the light a little bit more, the intensity. Now, this is probably my favorite tank, where if I have a coral that I'm really worried about, I'll just put it in here and it will heal up, and it'll basically get to its maximum. Just look at how puffy, for example, this forest fire mushroom is. So it is exemplary right over here. And the same forest fire mushroom, if we look at, let's say, this tank, I think I have some. They are puffy, but they are not as large. So this is a good example. I've also experimented where I would take, let's say, a Mountain Dew coral, which is right over here, and you can see it's a beautiful green coral, but it won't have as much polyp extension. And I would take this coral and place it over here, and the polyps would just pop. So again, why, I don't know, but just goes to show you that this tank is quite different, and sometimes when the same coral is not doing very well in this aquarium, or even the big one. So the big one, this tank should be super awesome because it's so large. Sometimes the same coral is going to do 10 times better when it's smaller. I don't know why. But I think that's the whole point of the video, is just to show you how unique everything is. And you know, is it the same bacteria? Is it a different bacteria in each one of them? I haven't done any tests, but I'm really curious about. In terms of algae, for example, I think that's pretty similar. But even then, I have, I think, more coralline growing in this tank than in this one. Why? I do not know. So this is tank number 4. The tank number 5 is actually in my sump. So right now it's on the reverse cycle, so right now the lights are off. I just turn on my sump light. But this is actually a G6 Pro light that is lighting some of the coral here. So I've moved some anemones, and this is the beautiful Pacific blue tank. I think it's Pacific. This is the hippo, and this one is a yellow belly. It's beautiful, but in this aquarium, for example, things are not doing as well as they do upstairs. Maybe it's me not spending as much time on it. Maybe it's the amount of algae. So I have tons of algae growing in this aquarium. Again, same water, same nutrient level. Everything is the same. It's right next to a skimmer, and yet the amount of algae is significant in over here. And even the light spectrum is different. There's a lot more white on this one. Now, I've been really enjoying the Radiance Pros, but I find that when it comes to coral growing, I think my next ones are always going to be the blues. I just find them to be a little bit easier to handle. When it comes to fish, I think the pros are more fun. But did I say 5 tanks? Technically, there is a 6th tank. How can this be? Well, the 6th tank is this little quarantine. So why am I calling it the 6th tank? It is because it gets about probably 100% water change every couple of days. So through those two tubes in the back, I have water in the automatic water change system coming through, and it just overflows into my fish quarantine system over here. So technically all the water chemistry should be identical between this tank and the other 5, and yet it's quite different. Even though I have one tank in here, which we've just seen, I got this nuisance algae showing up, and for some reason he's just not doing a good job of cleaning it. But I don't have any of this algae that kind of pops up in any of the other 5 tanks. So to sum up, we've seen 5, well technically 6 aquariums, and although they have the same water quality and fairly similar husbandry and even equipment, yet they are quite unique in my opinion. And that's not necessarily just because of the par differences and flow differences, but it is just something else that sometimes happens. Same for coral will react differently in one aquarium versus the other. And a lot of times, I think if you really observe your corals, look at if something has the polyps retracted, or it seems to like something, just monitor this and do more of that. And sometimes it will change over time. To me, this is a great example of us on different forums, like let's say Reef to Reef, documenting our anecdotal experiences, thinking that this is the way it's supposed to be, and yet to your friend the results can be completely different. So in this case it's all the same, and yet the results can be different. There's so many things we don't know, and that is one of the reasons why so many people are still drawn to this hobby, is because it's so unique and it's so challenging. So do not despair if you or get discouraged if you run into any issues. Listen to your corals, and over time I think you will learn how to observe your own corals and make whatever I guess decisions based on what you observe. So I appreciate you all learning together with me, and check out treasurecorals.com, where you will see I sell a lot of these corals if you are in Canada. So I actually have posted for example these 2 torches right over here, which are awesome, and even things like these caddies right over here. So I manufacture all this and design myself, and these I ship everywhere in the world. Thanks for watching, and see you next week.